After Russia invaded Ukraine, memes and artworks of a tractor towing away an enemy tank became a symbol of Ukraine's resistance. But behind these images is another, more alarming story: the disruption of Ukrainian agriculture.
You see, Ukraine has some of the most fertile soils on the planet and is known as the breadbasket of Europe. But Ukraine's produce is exported around the globe. Along with Russia, Ukraine produces huge amounts of the world's wheat, maize, barley and sunflower oil. According to the World Food Programme, the two countries supply 30% of wheat and 20% of maize to global markets. The disruption caused by the war has rippled across the world in the form of a global food crisis.
Since the war began, global food prices have skyrocketed. When prices spike, more people around the world are pushed further into hunger and poverty.
The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization has what's called a food price index, which tracks monthly international price changes on a basket of staple foods. These are cereals, vegetable oils, dairy, meat and sugar. After Russia invaded Ukraine, the global food price index reached an all-time high.
And 2022 is forecast to be one of the most food insecure years on record.
Conflict, climate change and the pandemic have combined to create a potential catastrophe. So is the world about to run out of food? What does a food crisis even mean? Put simply, a food crisis is when people can't access enough food or foods which are sufficient to avoid malnourishment. When millions of people around the world start experiencing a lack of food at the same time, then it becomes a global food crisis. This has happened before. In 2008, soaring global food prices were mostly driven by rising oil and fertiliser costs, a huge demand for corn-based biofuels, high shipping costs, financial market speculation, low grain reserves, and severe weather disruptions to production. In 2011, drought leading to lower wheat yields in Ukraine and Russia saw countries impose export bans on their own produce, which led global food prices to spike. During these spikes, millions of people suffered. So what's behind the rising food prices of 2022? Essentially, it's 3 C's: conflict, climate change, and COVID-19.
Rising international freight and fertiliser costs, driven by stronger demand and higher agricultural costs, have also played a part. The debt burdens of low-income countries whose economies suffered during the pandemic has hindered their ability to respond to the food crisis.
Export bans are also impacting prices. To keep domestic prices down, countries are imposing export bans on staples. Russia has banned export of wheat, Argentina beef, Indonesia palm oil and China fertilisers.
The reduction in supply of fertilisers can have a particularly alarming impact.
The third of the 3 C's causing a global food crisis, conflict, is not just the Russia-Ukraine war. There are a number of conflicts happening in 2022, and conflict continues to be the main driver of hunger. The World Food Programme says 44 million people in 38 countries are on the very edge of famine. This is up from 27 million people in 2019. But millions more people will be impacted by crisis or catastrophic levels of hunger. People in West Africa, the Horn of Africa, war-torn Yemen, Afghanistan and Syria are some of the most at risk. But there are solutions. It's important to remember there is enough food to feed the world. The 2022 food crisis has been caused by affordability and distribution issues.